Hey, this is Jason. On this episode, we have Ari Hoffman, and it's a little bit different than kind of my normal episodes, and it's also this episode doesn't quite fit with my vision of the show. I say about, doing these kind of non-confrontational interviews, and I think I kind of failed at that with this episode. I don't think the episode's terrible, but it's just not the fit for Talk to Seattle. So even though I said in the show that this episode won't be released until after the primary, I'm going to try to get it out as soon as possible just to get done with it. So I'd really thank Ari for coming on the show and thank him for his time. And so please take a listen to the episode, and I hope you like it.
Okay. Hello, Seattle. I'm Ari Hoffman. I ran for Seattle City Council in District 2. I run two companies in Seattle, and right now, since they are kind of on limited operation schedules, I developed a hobby of becoming a political commentator on national news stations and writing as a columnist for the Post-Millennial.
And you have a podcast you've been doing, right?
Yes, so I do a podcast which is called Canary in a Coal Mine. And what it does is it highlights the failures of local Seattle government policies and other craziness. And we showcase it to the rest of the country and show them how these policies spread and what they've done to other cities. So, for example, the one I can think of off the top of my head is the LEAD program, the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion program in Seattle, and how it is being touted as a national model when, in fact, it's a colossal failure and they haven't been able to produce any real data since 2014 that it worked. And that was one of the foundations of the New York bail reform law, which was allowing people who had committed anti-Semitic hate crimes to go free during a rash of these crimes in New York in December.
And you're also writing articles. Would you consider yourself a journalist now? Or were you a journalist before this?
I consider myself a columnist op-ed reporter. I report what I see. It's definitely through my frame. I don't pretend to be unbiased or anything of that nature. I report the facts as I have them. And sometimes they're op-eds and sometimes they're this is the news and here's what's going on. But I do not pretend to be an unbiased reporter. I definitely have an agenda and something that I'm trying to showcase.
And so as far as the podcast goes, what kind of motivated you to do that? There's a lot of people that I don't agree with this, that there are too many podcasts. What would you say to people that think that? I actually put out a request for questions for you, and that was one of the things we don't need another person with a podcast. And I was like, whatever.
Well, they don't have to listen.
Yeah.
That's really the truth. I mean, there's plenty of podcasts you see out there that have, 4 or 5 listeners or something like that. And that's how a person wants to spend their time. Let them spend their time that way. If they think they don't need another podcast, then nobody's forcing them to listen. If you disagree with the content you see on TV, change the channel. You don't like Fox News, switch over to CNN. I mean, there's something for everybody in the podcast world. And I actually think you see the way that the media is moving is that podcasts will one day rule the world. You see people moving away from the big networks, the big stations, and actually going with what supports their I guess, echo chamber. And that's unfortunate because you don't get the balanced opinions that way. But at the same time, you're able to find comfort that there are people who agree with your perspective, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. And that's the advantage of having multiple voices out there.
And so what was unique about podcasting to you? Because you could do the same thing with your articles or a blog or, a YouTube series. But what was special about podcasting?
Well, for me, I thought it'd be fun to try and kind of have guests on and talk to other people. And you can't really do that. I mean, yeah, you can interview people in articles and write it, but something else comes across when you can see body language. We do it video. We get tons of video hits where we don't get so many audio downloads, actually, because I think people actually want to see this kind of stuff. They want to see they want to see the person. They want to feel like they're connecting with the person, see body language, and see how that translates to what they're saying. You can also tell if somebody's not being truthful a lot of times based on their body language. So I thought it was important. One of the first things I did was interview all the candidates that I thought had a chance running for governor, because I think it's important that everybody get a chance to meet them. One of the things from my campaign was I tried to meet as many people as possible. I met with people who disagreed with me. I met with people who hated me, just because you can't just be a candidate for the people who agree with you.
I should note that this interview will be posted after the primary, just so you know what time period the listener is experiencing.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So one thing is that you're a very polarizing figure in the city. Why do you think that is?
That's a loaded question.
Oh no! I mean, do you disagree that people are?
Sorry?
Do you disagree that you think that people are kind of polarized by their opinions about you are very separate?
I think that there are voices that tend to marginalize me or demonize me because I don't fit their narrative. They don't like that I am showing that these are not peaceful protests downtown. They don't like that I show that the policies of the Seattle City Council were doomed to failure. They don't like that I have an opinion, and they try to demonize me. Here's something interesting. During the campaign, I got death threats, and the death threats were posted on the website 8chan, which is a known right-wing, alt-right, extremist hate site. And it turns out that the people who posted it were actually progressives. They were actually liberal extremists who posted that kind of stuff. So if they want to say I'm polarizing, I don't really understand where they get that from when anybody who asked to meet with me during the campaign, including progressives, including people on the far left, who want to have a discussion with me, we always met, and we always found areas we agreed on. People want to paint people as polarizing because they want to try and cancel them, because they want to try and say, this person's view is not valid. You shouldn't listen to this person. All of the people who demonize me on social media have never had those kind of conversations with me. They've never reached out. They've never taken the opportunity to talk. Instead, they just want to push their own agenda, and they just want to demonize and alienate people, and they want to divide. And unfortunately, what's going on right now is this whole cancel culture idea is let's get rid of the people we don't agree with. Not we have freedom of speech in this country. We want to hear different perspectives, even with ones we disagree with. And that's unfortunate.
So how do you see yourself politically?
How do I see myself politically? I see myself as a person who grew up in a liberal world and a more, I'd say moderate upbringing that got thrown to the right when I had very Democrat values at heart, because the Democrats in Seattle have been taken over by the progressives and did everything possible to demonize me, to attack me, to marginalize me. And when you get death threats on yourself, I didn't care about the Second Amendment before. It wasn't something that impacted me. But then I had to go get weapons training because I had death threats on my family. What did they expect me to do? So now I'm a proud defender of the Second Amendment. All they did was create a stronger conservative in me and give me a louder voice by all the attacks they do. And I got to say, the attacks are really great for my podcast, because anytime they share something they disagree with, I get more followers and more likes. So actually, I'd really appreciate it. Everybody has that one crazy friend online that you disagree with. And I don't think these people realize they may be them. Hey, I may be it to some people also. But when they spread these things, when they share them, saying they disagree with them, I pick up more listeners.
Do you ever try to cultivate that? There's a lot of personalities out there online that really try to kind of start internet beefs. You know what I mean?
I don't really try to pick fights on the internet. That's not something I do. I'll call out politicians when I believe that their behavior is incorrect or wrong. I'll call out people who I believe are promoting anti-Semitism online. But I don't try to create fights. There's one person in particular who seems to think it's his mission in life to demonize me. And I don't really know what I ever did to this person. I don't know if I dumped him in a past life or something like that. But this person seems to have made it his life's goal to just attack me. And I just think that speaks pretty low of that person. I think they should, get a life.
So you're also a columnist on, is it Post Millennial?
Yes, the Post Millennial.
Okay. You said that, you've received these anti-Semitic threats and stuff. But, a lot of people are a bit worried about that site because of some of the contributors have ties to white supremacy. Do you have any concerns about that when you started writing for them?
Who are the ones with ties to white supremacy? Because I haven't met him.
Okay. Andy No, I think, would be the one who would come to mind.
You're calling a guy who's an Asian American a white supremacist?
I said he had ties to white supremacy.
I think that white supremacy thing is something that people say when they want to demonize and marginalize somebody. I know Andy. I've spoken to Andy. I have never seen anything like it. Andy's one of the people who came to my defense when I had the anti-Semitic attacks, even before I was affiliated with the paper. And for anybody who calls him a tie to white supremacy, I would question why they would say such a thing. Andy No reports on the alt-left, on the extremists on Antifa, and how these criminals are bombing locations in Portland and in Seattle, and how they're attacking
police officers. What locations in
officers.
Seattle have been bombed?
Yes, absolutely. Did you not see the
what locations?
Did you not see Carmen Best's release yesterday of the explosive devices?
Those were fireworks, weren't they? If
there were more
on 4th
than
of
just
July,
fireworks.
if I was
These
to
were
say that those were
together,
explosives,
these
people
were
would have made fun of me.
cobbled together, homemade explosive devices, and one went through the wall of the East Precinct. Do you think a firework
So these were modified?
Yes, absolutely.
Because the pictures they showed just showed them mostly in packages. I haven't seen any actual evidence that it was actually like an improvised explosive device or anything like a pipe bomb or anything like that.
And
I don't think even the
police
have called it a pipe bomb, have they?
I don't think they've called them a pipe bomb. I'm calling them.
Okay.
I'm calling them bombs because if you go back to the original riots, the police posted pictures of IEDs, improvised explosive devices, that were used against the police department. That is what they were posting. Anybody who wants to say they're anything other than that should take another look at those pictures. Why are they lighting cop cars on fire? Why are they attacking police officers? Why are they trying to blind officers with green lasers?
I mean,
why are they trying
I'm a pacifist, so I don't agree with any of this stuff.
Why are they lighting fire to Uncle Ike's pot shop? Why are they destroying Starbucks? Why are they destroying Whole Foods?
But going back, do you see a difference between explosives and fireworks, or do you think that they are technically explosives, but generally that's not the common usage?
There, you can repurpose anything. I knew a kid in camp who decided to take a bunch of deodorant cans, lash them together, and try and blow up his bunk and light them on fire. Would you call that an explosive?
Well, I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, so if you take certain parts of glycerine from soap, you can make nitroglycerin.
Yeah.
Is that an explosive?
I think that would be going more towards the area where most people would consider explosives. Meaning, I know that technically, even a sparkler, I suppose, could be considered an explosive or an incendiary device. But generally, in common usage, like I said, during 4th of July, if I was over at my friend's house and they were lighting off fireworks and I was to call them explosives, they probably would have made fun of me. So that's why I'm kind of skeptical of the claims that these were explosives, because in common usage,
your friends typically shoot the fireworks at you?
Yes. I don't know about what kind of friends you have, but yes, I have very silly friends who oftentimes upset me with that kind of behavior, but yes.
Do they shoot mortars at you?
No, not on purpose. Although the year before this one, yes.
Okay, so while that's unfortunate, do you feel that behavior is safe?
Oh, no. That's not really the question here. It was just a matter of, are they being melodramatic by saying that they're explosives? That's kind of what I'm feeling a little bit, and a little bit concerned about maybe their honesty, that maybe they're not being 100% honest with us.
That who's not being 100% honest with us?
The police. Because, they do have an interest in this.
After effects of what happened to Uncle Ike's pot shop or Whole Foods or the Starbucks. Mm-hmm. So what are they not being honest about?
I'm sorry? I was specifically talking about the explosives. I was the fireworks is what I was talking about. That was my specific example.
Ian Eisenberg told me directly in an interview on my podcast.
I listen to that. I do listen to your podcast. I do have one request, though, for your podcast, is that your loudness is a little bit rough on me.
My loudness? Yeah. You mean that I talk
Sorry,
loudly?
this is going to get like... No. This is going to kind of get inside baseball. It's just your levels are a little bit rough.
Oh, well, that's because I'm a little bit rough. This is something that just,
I know. I'm just a podcast guy, so I've always got to give my little, as a listener, my little input. So sorry about that. Sorry for getting you off.
So it's funny because some people actually said to me, hey, it's a little too soft. Can you make it louder? So then I made it louder. And so I go back and forth. I mean, look, I'm not a professional with this kind of stuff. I bought a microphone for $100 and a camera for $200, and that's my recording system. I mean, I'm still cutting these things together on Windows Movie Maker. So, I am not exactly high tech here.
Well, good. So going back to your podcast, so where do you see this going? I saw that I think you had your season 1 finale, but then you did some bonus episodes. Are you still going to take a break, or is it just too much stuff going on right now?
Well, basically what happened was I took a break for the summer because I'm traveling with my family. The kids aren't in camp or anything like that, and they're home for the summer. So it's kind of difficult to do all this while on the road, especially because one of the highlights of my show is doing all these different interviews, and trying to coordinate that while you're doing trips with your kids is just impossible. But then a bunch of people said to me, hey, you're missing all this stuff. I go, I'm still writing about it. They go, yeah, but we really appreciate the podcast. Can you bring it back? So I said, okay, I'll do it when I can for the summer, but it's not something I'm trying to do as often as it's something I'm not able to do as often as I was during the year. And I think it'll be back probably after the primaries, maybe a little bit closer to September in the way it was before. But I only planned on doing this podcast once a week. And I was getting so much material that it became a 2-a-week episode. And I'm wondering that if things continue down the path they are, is it going to have to become a multi-week, multi-day a week show?
Yeah, where do you see it going in the future? Do you want to continue as a podcast, or would you like to develop it into maybe like a syndicated radio show or something like that? I know that's kind of like the dream of a lot of podcasters, is to go to that next level. It's a little bit easier to make money, but I don't know if that's really your goal.
Sure. Right now, it's just a hobby, and my goal is to alert people to what's going on in Seattle, people who may not realize this kind of stuff of what's going on. And if it turns into something more, great. Like I said, I got 2 companies that are barely operating right now, and added revenue is always appreciated. I'm not going to lie and say, oh, no, I wouldn't want that. Of course, I'd be happy with something like that. I don't know if that's the track I'm on. I don't know. I mean, I get a lot of calls from Fox News and Newsmax for interviews. I get a lot of requests from papers if I could write for them. So maybe that's the track I'm on, but that would be a serious career change for the bouncy house tycoon.
Yeah. And so the bouncy house thing, I could have sworn, I was looking at your profile today, and I could have sworn that the nickname was Bouncy House King, but it's Tycoon.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The stranger called me the bouncy house tycoon.
Okay.
They try to portray anybody who has a business in a negative light.
I thought for sure it was King, and I was very perplexed. I had one of those what they call them, like Mandela moments, where I was like, what happened here?
I got promoted by the social justice warriors.
So how did it work out that you started writing these columns for Post Millennial? Because that's kind of a huge change from, if you don't mind me saying, being the bouncy house tycoon.
Right. And actually, English is not my strong suit. Writing is not my strong suit. That's something I've actually had to work on, because writing is not something I've probably done since college. Basically, what happened was I saw an article about, I think it was anti-Semitism going ignored across the country during this rate of anti-Semitic attacks in New York in the post-millennial. And I contacted them and I said, hey, I have an interesting perspective on this. I'd like to write something about my experiences. And they said, sure, we'd love to have it. So I wrote it up, and the thing went, I don't know if I'd call it viral, but it definitely gained a lot of traction. And there was a lot of people talking about it. And what the main focus of the article was how much anti-Semitism had permeated the Seattle-based Democrat Party, and how it took me by surprise. And this thing really got shared, and it wasn't just shared by people on the right. It was shared by people in the middle, Democrats who feel like they have no home anymore. And after that, I just wrote op-eds from time to time. And then after that, it really blossomed when the protest started, when the CHOP came around. And it's unfortunate that it took these bad circumstances for that to happen. But that's when it became more, hey, I really need to start reporting on the news of what's going on here so people are informed.
So in those articles and some of your talking, this might be another upsetting question, but it seems like sometimes there's a lot of criticism about, how can I say this nicely? Kind of reporting things that might be more considered hearsay.
Like what?
I think the classic example that people point to a lot is the axe-wielding maniac story. I think there was that issue with the police recently, was something that was posted in the Post-Millennial. I think sometimes it feels like maybe hearsay or maybe exaggeration. I think even on our last interview, you said, I think that Georgetown was a war zone. Do you feel like maybe you exaggerated?
Have you spent any time in Georgetown recently?
Have you spent any time in a war zone?
Yes, I have.
And you truly in your heart think that they're comparable?
Have you been here at night?
I'm asking you, do you think that in your heart that those are really actually comparable?
Have you been here at night?
I'm sorry, but I'm the one doing the interview. I've asked you a question. If you don't feel comfortable answering, we can just move on to the next one.
Oh, no, I'm happy to answer it. I just want to know if you've been here at night, because I want to give you a frame of reference for the question.
Yes, I have been there many times at night, and it has never, ever felt like a war zone. It felt like being in a city.
So in my office, we've had bullets come flying through the windows. What would you classify that as?
I mean, that's a far cry from bombs falling from the sky and people with guns on every street corner that you would envision a war zone to be.
When I go walking down the streets here, and if I look the wrong way at a homeless encampment, quote unquote, they threaten me regularly. They threaten me with weapons. They threaten me with knives. I've been threatened with guns. Would you not consider that a dangerous environment?
I would say that was scary, but I think comparing a homeless person to a soldier is honestly ridiculous.
These are not homeless people. These are people who are dealing drugs and ripping people off of their supplies, of the things from the company, who are breaking
maybe to
into businesses.
be more specific, it's not
so
the
calling
homeless,
these people that are near my office, calling the people who are near my office homeless people is a misnomer.
Are you saying there aren't homeless people in Georgetown? I'm confused.
I'm not saying there aren't homeless people in Georgetown. I drive past some of them every day. I'm saying the ones that I deal with near my office, this is a different lifestyle that they're choosing.
So what is that lifestyle?
The lifestyle of crime. The people near my office have an entire chop shop behind their RVs and behind their tents, and have an entire stockpile of stolen products from nearby businesses and residences.
But is that a war zone, or is that just a high crime area?
What do you consider the difference between a high crime where you're being threatened with guns on a regular basis, where there's shootings on a regular basis, where there's stabbings on a regular basis, where I've seen children who I believe may have been victims of child trafficking in this area? What would you consider that?
I think I said high crime area.
High crime. I think it exceeds high crime.
What would be so there's a scale that goes above high crime and goes into war zone?
Look, you spend as much time down here. Let's put it this way.
What war zones have you been to?
I lived in New York and Washington.
You said you'd been to a war zone before. What war zone have you been to?
I never carried a weapon. Now I carry a gun to my office, and I never had to do that in Washington Heights.
But you said you'd been to war zones, I think. What war zone have you been to?
I have accidentally ended up in Palestinian territories during my year in Israel.
Okay, so but those would be more like, what would you say, insurgencies or rebellions, but not quite a war zone. I think a war zone, would you call that area, would you call Palestine, or rather, I suppose what you said, occupied territories, or a war zone?
I think that we're getting into semantics here.
Well, I think that's the point, is that I think that that's where we get to the idea that the accusation that sometimes you maybe exaggerate or sometimes are loose with the truth.
Prove the point.
Well, I think I just did.
I think that I just did also. Okay. We can agree to disagree on that.
So we're just about up on time, I think. My meter says 22 minutes. Do you have any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, I just, I appreciate the opportunity of you reaching out. I find it nice when people reach out and want to have a conversation with people they don't necessarily agree with.
I apologize if this is too contentious, but it probably will make for a good episode.
No, I don't find it contentious at all. Good. People are allowed to disagree. And in fact, I invite you to contact me anytime somebody has a question about one of my articles and you want to have an interview about it, because I think this is how you find common ground. We may not have found any today, but I think that when we have these discussions, it only furthers the cause and shows people that they're approaching.
All righty. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
No problem. You have a great day.
You've been listening to Talk to Seattle, and I've been your host, Jason Rigdon. If you liked this episode, would you please share it on social media? Most podcast clients have a little share button. Click that and tell people why they should listen. If you want to support Talk to Seattle, would you please give the show a rating and review on iTunes? It really helps new people discover the show, and it makes me happy. Follow Talk to Seattle on Twitter at Talk to Seattle, and email any questions, comments, or suggestions to jasonrigdon@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening.